When the lawyer read my mother's will, the room went quiet, too quiet for a family that had just inherited a fortune. I sat straight-backed in the mahogany chair, hands folded, heart steady. I'd been preparing for this moment for years. I knew what the documents would say. My mother had promised me the estate, the art, the vineyard in Sonoma, the townhouse in Manhattan. She told me more than once, "You're the only one who understands the weight of this legacy, Juno." But the man in the tailored suit adjusted his glasses and read the words that cracked my world in half. "To my daughter, Margot Whitmore, I leave everything." The name echoed like gunfire. Margot. I hadn't heard that name in 20 years. Not since the day she disappeared, with a suitcase full of our mother's jewelry and a forged passport. She was a memory, a wild, beautiful ghost that had haunted our family dinners but never dared return. Until now. I glanced at the woman across the table. She wore a cream-colored dress, a modest string of pearls, and a soft expression that screamed manipulation. Margot. Older now, sharper around the eyes, but still a snake wrapped in silk. "I'm sorry, Juno," she said, her voice as fake as her new nose. "Mother and I reconnected last year. We made peace. She wanted to make things right. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. Because my mother would never have changed her will. Not unless someone forced her. Not unless someone got to her first." That night, I walked through the halls of the Whitmore estate like a stranger. The portrait seemed to look away. The marble floors echoed with footsteps that weren't mine anymore. But I wasn't leaving. Margot thought she'd won. She had no idea I'd already started digging. And what I'd found in the past 6 months, hidden bank transfers, manipulated medical records, altered signatures, was enough to unravel everything. She stole my mother's face. Now I was going to take her life apart, piece by piece. Margot was living in my mother's house, wearing her perfume, sleeping in her bed. By the time I returned to the estate the next morning, she'd already moved into the master suite. The staff, loyal but fearful, greeted her with soft smiles and obedient nods. The gardener handed her fresh dahlias like nothing had changed, like she belonged. I watched from the courtyard dressed in black, holding a coffee I couldn't taste. She didn't see me at first, but when she finally turned, when her gaze found mine across the white stone terrace, I saw it. That flicker of panic. She smoothed her dress, tilted her head, smiled, and in that smile, I found everything I needed. Because it wasn't confidence. It was control. She'd spent decades rehearsing this moment. She'd studied my mother's voice, memorized her gestures, forged affection with counterfeit grace. But no matter how perfectly she played the role, she'd forgotten one thing. I knew her tells. The twitch in her left eye when she was nervous, the way she overpronounced words when she lied, the subtle shift in posture when someone got too close to the truth. She was trying to erase her past, to rewrite it with new ink and old lies. But I'd already started collecting evidence. A month before my mother died, she had withdrawn $250,000 from her private account, something she never did. The signature was shaky, the handwriting inconsistent. The nurse who cared for her had vanished after a sudden family emergency. And the voicemail my mother left me, cut off mid-sentence, had never been found on her phone. I wasn't just suspicious. I was certain. At brunch, Margot raised her glass like a queen toasting her court. The room applauded. My uncle chuckled. My cousin, easily impressed, called her elegant. I excused myself. In the study, I opened the hidden drawer beneath the writing desk, one my mother had shown me when I was a child. It still held the letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me, none sent. "Juno, I'm scared. I think she's back. She looks like her, but something is wrong. Promise me, if anything happens to me, don't trust her." My breath caught. This wasn't just inheritance. This was murder. I pressed the letters to my chest, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. Margot had stolen more than money. She'd stolen the woman who raised me, and she was about to find out exactly how dangerous grief can be, when it's wrapped in silence, sharpened by truth, and aimed like a dagger. I couldn't sleep, not because of guilt. That would have required me to believe I was doing something wrong, but because the weight of what I'd discovered had cracked something wide open inside me. The folder Elijah had left behind sat on the edge of my desk, like it was humming, alive. I didn't touch it again until 3 a.m., when the stillness of the city finally started to wrap itself around my shoulders, like a blanket I could breathe beneath. It was worse than I thought. Not only had Celeste been posing as Clarissa Fairchild, but she had fabricated entire pages of legal documentation. Titles, share certificates, tax filings, things no one would ever question unless they looked very closely. And, of course, no one had. Why would they? She had my father's name, his signature, his trust. But she didn't have his blood. She didn't know he kept a second ledger, a real one, bound in cracked leather, and kept behind a false panel in the wall safe. It was a habit from his early days in business. Double record-keeping, hidden redundancies. He always said, "The real story never lives in the files you hand over. It lives in the ones you hide." And I found it. Every transfer, every payment, every change in ownership. All of it tracked in meticulous handwriting, with notes only I could understand. Little things he'd taught me as a girl. The shorthand symbols, the asterisks for people he trusted, the red slashes for those he didn't. There, in the margins, next to her name, a triple red slash. Underlined. Not even Elijah had noticed. She had drained over $8 million in 2 years. Article. Assets. Property holdings in Capri, in Vermont. Even a shell account in Singapore. It wasn't just theft. It was annihilation. I sat there, staring at the numbers, at the lies, and something inside me clicked into place. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to erase her. Quietly. Permanently. The first step was the trust. My father's original estate plan had included multiple contingency clauses, one of which allowed for a temporary executor in the event of foul play. It was buried deep, but it gave me just enough of a legal foothold to challenge her standing, if I could prove fraud. But fraud needed evidence, and Celeste had buried hers well, except she had missed one thing: Elijah. He called me that afternoon, voice low. "She moved the Van Gogh to the penthouse, the one above Lexington." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Positive, she didn't even wrap it properly. Like she's not worried anymore." Of course she wasn't. The board had confirmed her as interim CEO. The media painted her as the grieving partner, bravely stepping in to stabilize the company after my father's sudden accident. But it wasn't an accident. I knew that now. And I was going to burn her to the ground with her own matches. I hired someone, discreet, expensive, ex-military, a man who didn't ask questions. All he had to do was get into the penthouse when she wasn't home, photograph every document he could find, especially anything linking her to the Singapore accounts. He delivered the photos on a hard drive. No contact, no names. I sat in my apartment that night, lights off, staring at the images on my laptop screen. She'd forged more than I thought. Medical records, marriage certificates, even a birth certificate claiming she had a child. My half-sibling. That one cut deeper than the rest. I printed the documents, labeled them, filed them in a steel case. I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. First, I had to make sure her world began to crumble, and I knew exactly where to start. At the next shareholder meeting, I arrived 10 minutes early. Celeste didn't expect me. She wore white. Of course she did, and smiled like a snake in silk. I said nothing, just handed a sealed envelope to the board chair. Inside, 16 pages of legal evidence, the kind that didn't just remove you from power. It put you in prison. As the chair's eyes scanned the papers, The silence around the long glass table thickened, and then Celeste spoke. She's lying. She's angry. That's all this is. But the chair didn't even look at her. We'll need to recess. The rest of the board followed him out, leaving Celeste and me alone in the room. She stood slowly, her hands still pressed to the table. "You think you've won?" she hissed. I leaned in just enough for her to see the steel in my smile. "You stole my name, my family, my father's empire. And you're a child playing with matches." "Good," I said, "because fire is exactly what you deserve." I didn't cry at the funeral. I didn't touch the casket, didn't look at the woman draped in silk and sympathy, pretending to be the rightful daughter. Instead, I watched. People whispered to her with soft eyes and sad smiles, the way they would have whispered to me. I recognized a few faces: old family friends, board members, a former Latin teacher who used to call me the quiet one with teeth. They looked at her with confusion that quickly turned to compliance. Money softens memory, and grief makes people lazy. She looked the part well enough: polished, poised, predictable. But there were cracks. She didn't know which side of the pew my grandmother always sat on. She winced when the family crest was recited in Latin. She stumbled through my mother's maiden name in the eulogy. Nobody noticed. But I did. And I wasn't just watching anymore. Afterwards, I lingered in the shadows, long enough to see her leave in a black town car with tinted windows and a driver who didn't recognize her either, long enough to hear one of the board members mutter, "At least she has the Whitmore chin." I nearly laughed. That chin belonged to a surgeon in Prague. Back at the house, I moved through the hallways like I never left. The scent of the wood polish hadn't changed. Neither had the way the sunlight poured through the atrium around 4 p.m., kissing the corner of the marble staircase where I used to sit and read while waiting for Mother's guests to leave. The painting above the fireplace had been replaced. Gone was the portrait of my great-grandfather, stern, furrowed, painted in oil and warning. In its place, a framed photo of her and my father, on a boat, laughing like the past wasn't a thing with teeth. She'd been here. She was already making it hers. In the library, I opened the cabinet behind the third shelf. Still locked, still untouched. I pressed the familiar spot on the side panel. Click. Inside the safe. My father's safe, and the code. I knew it by heart. There they were. The files, the original will, the trust documentation, the medical records. And a photo. Not a staged smiling photo, but a grainy, low-res image from what looked like a security camera. Her, standing at a birth registry office in Nevada, 3 years before she supposedly met my father. The next morning, I wore her favorite color, a pale blue cashmere sweater, the kind she would have chosen for brunch at the estate. I bumped into her deliberately on the steps outside the conservatory. She blinked at me, confused for half a second, and then gave a performance so clean it nearly earned applause. "Juno, right?" Her smile was smooth. "I'm so glad you came." I wasn't sure if I'd be allowed. My voice stayed warm, curious, not accusing, not yet. "We're family," she said, like it was simple, like she believed it. I let her hold the silence that followed, let it stretch until her confidence started to twitch. "Lovely service," I said at last. "You spoke beautifully." She blushed, humble and hollow. "Thank you. I just hope he was proud." I tilted my head. "Funny. That's exactly what he used to say about me." For a moment, her lips parted, something between a smile and a spasm. Then I walked away. She doesn't know I've already made copies. She doesn't know that her forged birth certificate has a typo. She doesn't know that the man who notarized her documents died 2 years ago, and that I visited his widow. She doesn't know that the heirloom ring she wears in every photo is a fake. I have the real one. She thinks she's playing a long game. But the board meeting is in 6 days. And when I speak, it won't be as the daughter who lost everything. It will be as the one who remembered everything she didn't. The boardroom was colder than I remembered, not in temperature, but in tone. The walls were the same deep oak, the chairs still lined in navy leather. But the air had changed, tighter, heavier, the kind of atmosphere that trembles before a storm. I arrived 5 minutes early. She was already there, sitting in Father's old chair, like it belonged to her. The others were making small talk, stock prices, oil futures, travel delays. But every time their eyes flicked to me, I could see it. Curiosity, uncertainty, the faintest hint of unease. The prodigal daughter returns. And yet, I smiled. "Miss Whitmore," the chairman said, rising slightly. "Good of you to join us." "It's still Whitmore, then?" I asked, letting my gaze drift toward the imposter. She smiled, tight, controlled. "For now," she said. There it was, the first crack. The meeting began the way these meetings always do: reports, budgets, performance summaries. She played her part well, her voice steady, her tone practiced. She spoke in percentages and plans, in legacy and growth. But the room wasn't really listening. Not after I opened the folder in front of me. Inside, copies of the original will, the trust conditions, and the revised beneficiary list, signed and dated 3 days before he died. Her name wasn't on it. I waited until the projector buzzed off, until silence swept the room like a tide going out. Then I stood. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, laying the documents neatly on the table. "But there's been a mistake." Eyes turned. Her face froze. "These papers," I continued, "belong to the real heir of Whitmore Holdings. Not the fabricated one sitting in that chair." Murmurs rippled across the table. The chairman cleared his throat. "Miss Whitmore, I trust you understand the seriousness of this." "I do," I said, calm and clear. "That's why I've also submitted the documents to the family attorney, the Financial Oversight Board, and the press." Just in case she stood. "Those are lies." "All of it." I raised a hand. "Your notary died 2 years before your paperwork was filed. Your birth certificate misspells Nevada. Your fingerprints don't match any official records prior to 2020. You're not even who you say you are." She looked at the others, desperate now. But I had the room. And I had the truth. They escorted her out 20 minutes later. No handcuffs, not yet. But I saw the look on her face. Not rage, not shame, just fear. Because her safety net had vanished. And all that was left was me. Afterwards, I walked through the estate in silence. No cameras, no audience. Just the creak of the floorboards beneath my steps. In the study, I placed the real heirloom ring back where it belonged, on the velvet cushion inside the display case my grandfather built. It gleamed in the afternoon light, like it knew it had come home. People think revenge is loud, but mine was quiet, calculated. I didn't need to scream or slam doors. I just waited, watched, and told the truth. Sometimes the sharpest weapon isn't rage. It's remembering who you are, and making sure everyone else does too.